Did I just say that?
Don't say it online. No, I haven't let anybody in yet. No, she didn't.
She didn't talk like she was.
Yeah. No, she
I didn't like the way she talked.
was not a sophisticated county.
No.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Hello.
Hi there, how are you?
Hi, Rabbi.
Oh, wait. Hold on a second.
Okay,
Hold it.
okay.
I need to.
Did I lose you? Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Joyce.
We can hear you.
Hi, Joyce.
No, yeah, back. Or like there.
Now you can see yourself.
Well, it's hard to see yourself, but
I can't,
here,
But-
let me zoom in. Here,
hi Harvey,
wait. let me-
Hi there, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
There you are.
We're
See
doing
that?
great.
There she is.
You are.
Gotta wait for the camera, young lady.
Oh, hi. What do you mean to
You can't look at them. Because you gotta look at the camera, because if you look at them, they don't see you.
Used to it.
I know. But you have to,
Here. The little light.
yeah, she's,
Oh, God.
welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody. What?
Style.
Stop it.
No, I don't know who, I've heard of him, but I don't know what he does. Is he a singer? Yeah.
Yes, he's very popular. He's very popular.
Does he have a man bun?
Yeah, I think he does.
A band called One Direction.
Really? I don't.
He was.
God,
Listen to Glory pretending like she doesn't know who he is.
it's younger than me, come on. It's
I
like,
know,
oh,
friend named
kids
Cheryl.
Yes.
Maybe it was, because he's Gary, so I thought maybe.
You're talking about my wife posting the tickets. Yeah. It's a long story, but anyways.
That news are good.
Uh-huh.
We went to bed last night and that.
You know, this is a
numbers were bad.
recording.
Yeah, we're on recording. Yeah. Did you see his last words though?
Yeah.
So, anyways, it's Veterans Weekend coming up. So we're honoring our veterans and have a special Shabbat Friday night for veterans. Right?
Nice.
And I just got an email today. I'll just it's an interesting halachic question. I'll see what your I won't tell you what my response. Well, I haven't really fully responded yet. See what your response would be.
Can they hear you too?
Yeah, they can hear me. So here's the question. Before I post us up on.
We agree with you, Rabbi.
I haven't told you, listen, I want to hear what your thoughts are first. So here it is. Ready? Here's the rabbinic question. Okay. So we have a Veterans Plaza here in Santa Clarita,
Yes.
right? It's a new hall, not far away from where we're standing right now. And they have a Christmas tree and a menorah there that they light for the holidays. Right? And every year I go over there and we light the menorah and light the Christmas tree, and we have a little service out there. And they're doing the lighting on December 3rd. Just 2 weeks from now, or 3 weeks from now, whatever, 3 weeks from now. December 3rd. So they just asked me, do we light the menorah? The first night of Hanukkah is December 18th,
Oh.
right? Do we light the menorah December 3rd when they light the tree, or do we wait to light it till December 18th? What is your answer, folks?
Can I speak?
That's Mike's answer. What's the answer? Mike, well, if you heard him or not. Mike, whatever, he answered first. Mike says Mike says you wait until the Hanukkah night to light the menorah. Okay,
Rabbi, can you hear me?
Say light it.
what?
I would say light it.
Yeah, because,
Everybody, it's a symbolic. And
No, it's not symbolic.
okay, well, this is her opinion, this is her opinion. Okay, no, we're not having an argument. What's yours? Okay.
It's a celebration, you light the menorah.
What do you say, Mary? What do you say?
Because of
Anybody online, what is your answer? What's your rabbinic answer?
I would place the menorah but not light it till the 18th.
So there's
I like Harvey.
Harvey's.
Okay, but if
Anybody else?
if you do that, does that mean that you need to go back and light one of the lights every night for 8 nights?
Good question. So following that logic, what would your logic, what would your answer be then?
What do you do in the past?
Lit up on the rest of the night.
What? Yeah,
So
they're lighting it now and they're only living on.
one lit. One
Well, that's what Cheryl's question was.
one light lit until the.
No, I'd light them all. You're not gonna come back. It's symbolic.
Well, no, I think their question was, would they light it every day? Because that's what they've done in the past.
Oh.
They've lit it.
Like the first one, do they light it every day?
Well, not necessarily, because we kind of turn it on when they turn it on. Whatever day it is that they tell me that they're turning it on, I go there, we have a service, there's people singing, and sometimes they sing some Hanukkah songs. It's like a holiday pageant.
How about if they just light the promise?
Look at Glory. Glory's answering like a rabbi. So, and I think that's what Cheryl was getting at. I think that was Cheryl's. Right? That was kind of what she was getting at. So it's interesting because I definitely was on the side of lighting it. Because the answer is that if you don't light it, you've got a lit tree and then the menorah isn't lit. Now, I know what Mike's saying. It's going, it's not the purpose of it. There's actually a purpose for lighting a Hanukkah menorah, right? We light it and count the days. It's actually functioning as a light. But the interesting thing is that the Hanukkah menorah actually does two things. It is reenacting, if you will, the miracle of Hanukkah in a way, right? Though some people have argued, if you're reenacting the miracle of the light, wouldn't you take off a light every day?
Some people do.
Which is, well, not some people, but I argued with Rabbi Hillel over that, and there was differences of opinion 2,000 years ago when it came to how to light the menorah, either decreasing the candles every day, or as Hillel said, we increase it because each day it increased, the miracle increased, and so as the miracle increased, we add light to show the miracle. But the mitzvah of lighting a menorah is to proclaim the miracle of Hanukkah. And so the mitzvah really is to proclaim and to kind of celebrate Hanukkah. So you can make the argument that this is also kind of following along the lines of proclaiming the miracle and fulfilling that kind of mitzvah rather than fulfilling the mitzvah of counting the days of Hanukkah with it. Mike's point, and I think, and again, Harvey's point might be of not lighting it wrong, is because then you're instructing people to do something wrong, which is something we don't want to do in Judaism.
And just because they're lighting the Christmas tree doesn't mean the Jews have to light their menorah.
Correct. But Rabbi John's point was that it's a minor holiday.
I agree.
So if it's a minor holiday, then we're less. He did. You did too. You already promoted. But his answer, well, Rabbi Glory and Rabbi Cheryl already gave their answers too, based on trying to find a compromise, which is a very Jewish idea. Rabbi Mike is coming around to it. So then you get to actually see the light and show that there is a light. But it is an interesting thing. Most importantly is Hanukkah lights are not supposed to be for lights. You're not supposed to use them for your light.
Exactly.
So that's one of the important things is that you don't light it up so that you say, well, we want to keep that block lit up today. That's not what it's supposed to be for.
You don't use it as a
You're
light.
not supposed to use it as a light. It functions, your Shabbat candles are not supposed to function as lights, which is why, well, they're not supposed to be, you're not supposed to read by them, or you're not, Hanukkah lights, technically speaking, are not supposed to function as your lights. So back in the day when people didn't have electric lights everywhere, the Hanukkah menorah was a problem because it definitely gave your house light, especially if you didn't have candles everywhere. So guess what, folks?
What?
You may not have thought about this, but the shamash candle, the candle you're talking about, it's usually in the middle, doesn't have to be in the middle, but the shamash candle, the helper candle, we always say to ourselves, well, that's the candle that lights all the other candles. That's what makes it a shamash. It's the helper candle. That's what shamash means. It means the helper. It's the same root as the word shamus,
Oh.
which we usually translate as the helper in the synagogue, but it was literally the janitor, the sexton is the title, the fancy title, but the shamus was the person who opened and closed the synagogue. He was the helper. But a shamash candle is the helper, but it's not the helper because it lights the other candle. And you know how we know that? You should know that. You can think about it. The original menorahs did not have candles. They were oil with a wick. You didn't use a wick to light the other wicks. Couldn't do that. Can't. It's oil. You can't pull out the oil and light the other candles with it. So the shamash on the Hanukkah menorah is a special candle, which is actually the candle that you're using for light in your house. So if there's any light that's coming off the shamash, off the Hanukkah, it's not those lights, it's the shamash. It allows you to get light from it without saying it's one of the nights we count.
Right.
That's why it's really the helper candle, not because it lights the other candle, because it actually functions as the light candle, if you will, for what you have. On that lamp, it is your light. And so you can't really determine which one is the light of your house, but that allows you to basically say, I'm not really using the light, I'm using the light of the shamash. So the shamash candle really can function like a helper. And we could say that maybe for the Veterans Plaza, it could be the helper.
Let me ask you a question though, when we.
Yeah.
light the candle at the mall, they only light from.
Is that what you're gonna do?
No, they light whatever night it is. We just usually do it on the first night,
Right, but
like this year.
so then they'll light all eight.
If it, oh, after that, yeah, no, we don't keep it up.
Yeah, no, they.
Or we're not maintaining it. Chabad maintains it. We actually did have a menorah there for a few years at the mall, like not a competing menorah, but another menorah that was Temple Beth Ami's, but it got destroyed. It got beaten up. And unfortunately, yeah, did not survive.
Is actually owned by, Shabbat?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah. So we bought the same one. It's like $900 too. And we bought the same one and we had one. We had actually had dueling menorahs for a while at the mall. But usually Chabad usually has an arrangement with Westfield malls where they get to be the ones in charge of it. The reason they own it. It's not owned by the family anymore,
Right.
but it's still a Westfield mall. But they had for years a national relationship where they let Chabad come in. The difference is that I got in here first, and so I at least got us so that we could be recognized as a partner with Chabad for the menorah. And we've always cooperated. It's always,
Do it outside again.
yeah, it's never been a problem. But funnily enough, I got a call from my friends at Ralph's and they wanted to put up a menorah at one of their stores. So I said, sure, of course, I'll come over. We'll put one up. Put a little Temple Beth Ami sign on it. And I said, where is it? They said, it's the one on Soledad in Canyon Country. I said, you want to put a menorah up at the Ralph's in Canyon? They said, yeah. I said, okay, well, if they want to, I'll do it. But I never heard back from them. I kind of dissuaded it from them. I said, if you're going to put one up in Ralph's in Santa Clarita, that would be the last store. And I'm not saying anything bad about Canning Country. I'm just saying, and I shouldn't go any further than that because that's Ralph's internal politics, and this is on television, whatever. It is public. But yeah, I told him, I said, don't, that wouldn't be my first choice, but if you want to, yeah, I said, don't go crazy. I said, if you really want to put out a lot of Hanukkah stuff, put it out in one of the other stores. And I actually was being serious because if they put it out there and then nobody gets it, then they're going to say they didn't sell. Yeah, so Granary, he knows. I said Granary Square, Decorro, Stevenson Ranch. I said, put them over there.
Oh, wait,
That's not them. So I said, if you put it up there, I want that, I want people to respond to it. I want them to come. I don't want them to think that they didn't have any stuff. And I'll tell you, it was very funny because Target oftentimes has really good Hanukkah stuff. But my daughter Dina lives in San Diego. She went to the Target in Mission Valley, San Diego, and there was nothing for Hanukkah. And then my daughter Rachel, who lives in Fairfax, went to the Target in Fairfax, and it was everywhere. The one on Santa Monica and West Hollywood, it was everywhere. So they sent dueling pictures of which Target had better Hanukkah. There was not even a question. John, you were going to say something though. Let's go back to you.
That was, last week or 2 weeks ago, you mentioned, congregation membership right across the country.
Yeah.
So this is a form of outreach, really, more than a holiday, more than so really, and with all the anti-Semitism going on, right? And I'm assuming they're going to give you some time to speak. So even if you lit everyone, right, and you give an explanation, it's an outreach, it's a dual outreach, the way I look at it.
Yep.
And you leave it lit. And that way they put people that are there, put a thing to the rabbi, they put it together. Are we really need people, or maybe we want to join, I don't know.
No, you're absolutely right. This is an important outreach. And I think the public sphere, outreach is super important. And that's why we've always done it. I mean, we've always tried to do it. By the way, this is that's the Target in Fairfax. and Rachel's comment below, my daughter Rachel's comment below was, Dina and I shop at very different Targets. So that was, yeah. So when Dina went into the Target by her in San Diego, they said, we haven't put it out yet.
Right.
And meanwhile, there was like tons of Christmas stuff. She's like, when are you putting it out? She says, okay, Dina, then, Dina's pretty tough. She goes, well, I'll be coming back here then, and I'll be checking on you. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, it's not going to be pretty. And the Target in Mission Valley is actually pretty big. It's like a 2-story, it's like almost like a anchor store in a mall. But I don't think they're gonna have it. It's just it's a different community. So we read actually about the menorah, the construction of the menorah just recently, and actually today we're continuing on with the discussion, but we're actually going to we want to get into now as we start, we want to get into, and I'm going to need your help, Mike, because I forgot we got to go up on Facebook. We're going to get into some of the other parts of the temple, and we're going to, or the original tabernacle, and we're going to get some very interesting descriptions of. I know, you told me.
No, let's say two.
Okay, we'll take a look at it. We are going to put up the, here we go. We're going to look at the making of the incense. So where we left off, actually just before that, is we talked about the shekel tax that everybody had to give. We talked about the fact that everyone had to give it. Everybody has to pay. It says everyone who is entered 20 years and up shall give. The rich shall not pay more, and the poor shall not pay less. And this is what everyone had to pay. Now, again, it's not an egregious amount of money. I mean, we're not talking about for the year, for the amount of money that was there. It wasn't that much, but it adds up for millions of people eventually. As we talked about, the priesthood ended up by the Roman period becoming very corrupt and too wealthy because they had too much money. They had too many shekels. And so you shall take the expiation money from the Israelites and assign it to the tent of meeting. It shall serve the Israelites as a reminder before Adonai as an expiation for your person. So it's part of asking for forgiveness. It's part of their forgiveness. It's part of their expiation of sin. And so it's a pretty serious thing. It's a pretty important thing. And when people gave it, they were feeling like whether they gave another sacrifice all year, they knew that their money at least was being used for that. Pretty important thing. Now, this is where we pick up. Adonai spoke to Moses saying, make a laver of copper and a stand of copper for it for washing, and place it between the tent of meeting and the altar. Put water in it, and let Aaron and his sons wash their hands and feet in water drawn from it. So that's the laver. That's the big bowl that we saw. So the big bowl that we saw. When they enter the tent of meeting, they shall wash with water that they may not die, or when they approach the altar to serve, to turn into smoke and offering by fire to Adonai, then they shall wash their hands and their feet that they may not die. It shall be a law for all time for him and for his offspring throughout the ages. Now we saw that by the time of the laver in King Solomon's time, the laver was so big that it would have literally almost collapsed on itself because of how big and how heavy it would have been with the amount of water that it would have held, which was super heavy. I mean, tons of water that would have been in the giant laver, not in this one necessarily in the tabernacle, but the one that was in the temple when it was built in Jerusalem. So this was an immense fountain, which they had to fill with water. It was not the water was all brought in artificially. And then it says, Adonai spoke to Moses saying, next take choice spices, 500 weight of solidified myrrh. And let me just see if it says, there's other readings of this. It says flowing myrrh, which of course is a spice. Half as much, 250 of fragrant cinnamon, 250 of aromatic cane, 500 by sanctuary weight of cassia, and a hin of olive oil. Now, some of the translations might be a little different. Glory, what do you have for your translation? That's myrrh, cinnamon, cane, and cassia, and olive oil.
500 shekels of liquid myrrh, half as much, that is 250 shekels of fragrant cinnamon,
Okay, same.
250 shekels of fragrant cane.
Okay.
500 shekels of cassia, all according to the sanctuary shekel, and a hin of
Olive oil. Yeah, olive oil, we're pretty sure that that's what that is. Anybody else? Same thing, Mary? Is that the same for the King James?
calamus instead of.
Yeah, calamus. Yeah, so there's look, most of this we know what it is because the Hebrew words are very common and they're well known. Again, Cain is really the transliteration of this word kenna, which is the spice. I'll show you right here. This says right here, cinnamon. That's because cinnamon is a Semitic word. That's a word that we took from Arabic and Hebrew. So cinnamon was a spice that came from the Middle East, and that's very well known. Probably the most famous of the spices that was used was actually this myrrh, right? Because we know about it from Jesus and from the gold, frankincense, and myrrh that are brought to Jesus as a baby. It was a prized spice and it was used for incense. It was very expensive in the ancient world. And it was clearly one of the bases for the spices because it says there's 500 shekels of this, in the weight of this. Now, this would have made a huge amount of spice, right? 500 shekels here, 500 shekels, 250, 200. I mean, you add it up, it's a couple thousand shekels, pounds. This is pounds and pounds of spice. So they would make it up, and then assumedly, again, it says, make of this a sacred anointing oil, a compound of ingredients expertly blended to serve as a sacred anointing oil. With it, anoint the tent of meeting, the ark of the pact, table and all its utensils, the altar of incense, the altar of burnt offering, and all its utensils, and its laver and its stand. Thus you shall consecrate them so that they may be most holy. Whatever touches them shall be consecrated. Now, this oil and consecrated incense is, well, let's read a little bit further. Thus you shall consecrate them so that they be most holy. Whatever touches them shall be consecrated. You shall also anoint Aaron and his sons, consecrating them to serve me as priests. And speak to the Israelite people as follows. This shall be an anointing oil, sacred to me throughout the ages. It must not be rubbed on any person's body. You must not make anything like it in the same portions. It is sacred to be held sacred by you. Any party who compounds its like or puts any of it on a layperson shall be cut off from his kin. So this oil, this sacred anointing oil, you can't make any of it for personal consumption. Now, this it's a pretty serious issue because it says anyone who makes any compounds of it shall be cut off. Now, this one is the liquid version of the it's a liquid spice. It's a liquid incense. It's used for anointing and it's used for rubbing on sacred things. So it's not a dry spice. It's not a dry incense, but it is very, I mean, we don't know exactly how it smelled, but you can imagine what it smelled like. And actually, there are people who make this. Now, the problem, Mary's looking at me like that, which is, why are they making it for? Yep. Uh-huh.
Who was handing this out to people. Something that she had put together trying to follow this. And she labeled it spiritual holy oil or something.
Yeah.
Did you smell it? I did. Was it pleasant? It was pleasant.
Yeah, well, you can buy this stuff you can buy this stuff in Israel. You can buy it and have it sent to you right here.
Oh my.
So there you go. Yeah, you can have this stuff sent to you. Look, it's not pre-mixed, so you can make the argument that it's not, well, at least.
They added jasmine.
Yeah, it doesn't even say that, right? Well, this one actually says incense, fragrances of the Holy Bible. So we're going to get into we haven't gotten into the dry incense yet. I probably jumped the gun here by showing you this, but yeah, this is not, here's, somebody else selling some kind of, I don't know, this is Christian stuff.
So why would they sell it if it says
Yeah.
whoever makes perfume like it, whoever puts it on anyone other than a priest must be cut off from.
Well, that's why we don't do it. The reason why the Jewish community doesn't, the reason why these things are not done by Jews is because it says in the Bible you're not supposed to do it.
And we listened to it.
Because, well, here's what happens. So there's a certain departure from Look. So here's what I think happens. What I think happens to some extent is when people, there is a possible understanding. I'm not saying every Christian understands things this way, but there's kind of an understanding that these laws don't apply anymore. So the law that just said that if you make this stuff, you're cut off, they're saying it doesn't really apply anymore. So if you say it doesn't apply anymore, then there's no punishment for it. So if there's no punishment for it, then we can mess around with it. Jews, really, there's no cutoff date on this. There's no expiration date on this.
For all ages.
Yeah. And so we look at it as like, now, look, obviously, most Jews don't follow the letter of the law when it comes to the Torah. Needless to say, most Jews don't follow every law. Otherwise, we would not be eating pork or eating shellfish or eating all the other tasty things that our people eat on a regular basis. So we clearly don't understand this the same way in the literal sense either. But I think there's a difference between saying, well, I'm going to not really pay attention to every law to I'm going to purposely violate this law. Now, I don't, maybe that's splitting hairs, but I think there's a lot of people who'd say, well, I'm not following all the laws, but I'm not going to rush out to take the Lord's name in vain just because I don't believe that these laws are applicable anymore. So I think for Jews, there's the kind of sometimes a feeling like, yeah, I'm not going to necessarily follow the laws, but I'm not going to be, I'm not going to flout it. I'm not going to purposely like just do the opposite of it. And when it comes to something like this, it's like, why would I, for what reason would I break this commandment? I'd literally have to go out of my way to break this commandment. But I think to some extent when Christians, especially evangelicals are oftentimes the people who are buying this, they look at it as we're trying to understand what spices Jesus would have smelled. And so it's not really like they're doing anything where they're purposely, dismissing it, because they don't read the law and say, well, it says you can't do it or you're going to be cut off, because they don't believe that the law applies to them that way. So I don't think that they look at it quite the same way. But the bottom line is that, again, most Jews would not engage in making this because they're like, well, I'm going to purposely go out and break this law. So I think there's a difference between like eating pork occasionally and then purposely going out and trying to break these laws. And that's what I think happens within the Jewish community. It's one of the reasons why, like, I wouldn't have an issue smelling it. I wouldn't believe that I'm breaking the law from it. Number one, I'm not the one who created it. Number two, look, I understand the impulse for doing it. The reason why Jews do not do this is because we do not know the exact measurements of this, and we don't want to do it in such a way that would actually, as we said before, essentially instigate or make God upset by doing it wrong. And so most people wouldn't go about doing it. Or again, they wouldn't make it in such a way that like somebody could use it and then just rub their body with it, because the Bible says you're not supposed to do it. So I think there's like a certain level of, if you take this seriously, and an Orthodox Jew is definitely not going to make this stuff and use it for a silly purpose. We're not done yet, but because this is more of the oil, the incense oil. Then this is the other part where again, there'll be some different translations, but this is the actual incense that's like burned. This is the dry incense. Adonai said to Moses, take the herbs, stacte. I'm seeing what the Hebrew, onycha, galbanum, these herbs together with pure frankincense. Also, again, very expensive herb. Look, the reason it says gold, frankincense, and myrrh is because those three things were all pretty expensive. Let there be an equal part of each. Make them into an incense, a compound expertly blended, refined, pure, and sacred. Beat some of it into powder and put it before the pact in the tent of meeting, where I will meet you, and it shall be most holy to you. But when you make this incense, you must not make any in the same proportions for yourself. It shall be held sacred by you to Adonai. And any party who makes any like it, to smell of it, shall be cut from kin. So here, again, you're not supposed to make any of the dry incense. You're not supposed to mess around with it. You're not going to rub it on your body because it's dry incense. But like this, you're not supposed to, you'll be cut off from your kin if you do it. And of course, what do we use incense for? We smell it. Now, Catholic Church still uses incense. They do. It's not the biggest part of Catholic ritual necessarily anymore. I think they've even kind of downplayed it because people have more sensitivity to it. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I think somebody has told me that that's at least in operation in some churches. The Catholic Church they have a formula for making incense. They send it out to churches. The incense is used. It's also used in Greek Orthodox churches. I don't think it's the same exact proportions, but it is based on it's based on this stuff that the priests used. So it is 100%, based on that. Other religions, other cults, other groups of people used incense for worship. The Catholic incense, and I'll show you what it,
I have a question when you have
yeah.
a break.
One sec. Let me just post up. This is, still used in Mass. Let's see. This is, let's see. I'm going to put, this is, these are different. See, these are different ones. This is Roman incense, frankincense, and Jerusalem incense. It says, you can see the different ones you can buy. So these are Catholic Supply Company of St. Louis. So you can see that these are what the bags would look like for church use. So the church has, they have a special blend that they use, and they can share it and buy it. And they believe, of course, that they're preserving that tradition. Yeah, John.
This is all really detailed stuff.
Mhm.
And we'll stipulate that listen, I'm not a history expert, right? I'm just going back and actually learning, some of the stuff I probably forgot 40 years ago, but let's just stipulate that the first writings were 3200 BCE, right? And, there were people before that, but the first and this is what? This is happening 2000 years,
2,500, 2,600 years ago.
I'm not asking, maybe maybe, is there any kind of midrash or anything in regards to why God waited so long? I mean, this seems to be so important and so detailed, right? Why did he wait? I don't even know how many generations that is, right? To now.
Yeah. So first of all, the tabernacle is the first attempt that the Israelites have at institutionalizing worship. Well, there's a couple ways of answering this. So one possibility is that we don't exactly know what the tabernacle looked like by the time they wrote this. So the tabernacle would have been in operation. Let's step back for a second. We're reading this, and it's taking place during Moses's time, which would have been about 1200 BCE. And according to the Bible, King Solomon builds the temple about 1000, which means this would have been in operation. The tabernacle would have been in operation for 200 years, 40 years in the wilderness, and about 160, 150 years in the land of Israel, where it was brought from a couple different, it was in Shiloh, it was in a couple different places, and then King David brings up at least the ark, and it says some of the other holy things, into Jerusalem. His son, King Solomon, builds the temple just after he dies. And then that temple is in operation from 1000 until about 600 when the Babylonians destroy it. So it's destroyed after about 400 years of operation. Did the temple have the tabernacle in it? Did it have part of the tabernacle in it? We don't know. There's debates on whether it was like that. There are a couple big possibilities. I would say there's two big main possibilities. The one is the tabernacle it existed, but they had no idea what it really looked like. It's a possibility. These are oral traditions, and maybe they didn't really have these dimensions, but these dimensions seem pretty detailed. So if it didn't exist like this, then why do we have it? Because the temple was built as a scale model of this, or a representation that the temple was built with this in mind, and the details of this are kind of based on the temple rather than on the tabernacle itself. It's a possibility. The other possibility is it's exactly, these were the exact dimensions. But getting back to your question, so why did God wait? Well, so Moses and the people coming out of Egypt, this would have been the first time that they prayed together as a nation. So there really wasn't a time for people to pray with a priest, because Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all of those people would have offered up sacrifices in their backyard or whatever shrine that Abraham talks about, the different places where Abraham offered sacrifices. Abraham offered sacrifices. Now, he's not a priest, but they didn't really have priests. There were no Jewish priests. Actually, we do read about other priests of other religions. Moses' father-in-law is called a priest of Midian, so he's a priest. But we don't know exactly what those priests did. Let's assume that they offer sacrifices. So there was some model for it. But Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob all offer sacrifices. They all offer them. So the rabbis like to imagine that they knew how to offer up sacrifices. God told them how to offer up sacrifices. And that when the Kohanim, when Aaron and his sons get around to offering them, that's the way we've been offering sacrifices for hundreds of years. They would never entertain the idea that Abraham and Isaac and Jacob didn't offer them the same way. But they weren't Kohanim, they weren't priests, they weren't professionals. They're saying that they're professionals, and this is the way you're supposed to do it from now on. And remember, they're also saying that only we can do it. Only Kohanim can do it, and only in Jerusalem. So by the time that this is written, that's the message that people have. As I already told you, that's probably not the message that everybody wanted to hear. It's not the message that everyone believed, because there were still, if not the majority of Israelites, who were saying, what are you telling me? I have to go to a priest to offer it in the temple in Jerusalem? I can offer it in my own backyard. I can have the local Levite who lives in my community. He can offer the sacrifice to me. So I think there was a big difference of opinion at the time the Bible was written. But the people who wrote the Bible 100% believed that only they could be the ones to offer the sacrifices, because they were priests. So we talked about it in the Kings on our Tuesday morning class. There's a big argument in the Bible that we see where the priests who wrote the Bible, and definitely wrote it by about 800, which is only a couple hundred years after, 150 years after, are saying that the northern kings are bad. Even if they're good, they're bad because they're not offering sacrifices in Jerusalem. So they could have been offering them the same way, with the same spices, with the same everything. And the people in Jerusalem, the priests were saying, you're doing it all wrong. And of course, by extension, you're making God mad because you're doing it wrong. And so I think that that's probably what I think that's what really happened, was that for hundreds of years, there was disagreements over who really has the authority to offer up a sacrifice. And it was a big deal. It was not a little deal. It's a big deal, because the priests used it as their livelihood. It was their lives. They depended on it. And then the rest of the people were like, who are you to tell me where I can offer up my sacrifices? And I think that was a big issue. Now, once the Babylonians destroy the temple, and then the Jews come back and rebuild the temple, what we call the second temple, Interestingly, there are more, I shouldn't say there are no more temples. There really aren't many more temples anymore. The idea of Jews offering sacrifices in other places is not an issue. By Jesus's time, 500 years, 400 years later, it's 100% not an issue. Because by Jesus' time, nobody's saying, hey, let's offer up sacrifices in our backyard with Jesus. They're not doing it. The only place that they think that they can offer up sacrifices by then is Jerusalem. And some people seem cool with that, and other people seem like, who cares if you even offer up a sacrifice? God doesn't need sacrifices anymore. We can pray to God. We don't have to go to Jerusalem to offer up sacrifices. I can only tell you that by that point in time, it was already like a done deal. There's only Jerusalem, but who necessarily needs to go? So if you want to know when was the time when all this focus was on the temple, probably for a few hundred years after the Babylonian destruction, when the Jews had rebuilt the temple in Jerusalem, and there was kind of unanimity that that's where Jews worshiped.
What year was that?
About 500 BCE.
So that. We know there were probably people on Earth through Genesis, whatever, before 3200.
Yep.
BC, all right?
Yep.
So you're telling me that God waited 2,500 years to see what the humans would do?
Well, you could make the argument that the argument that the traditional sources, that the rabbis who are going to say only the priest can offer sacrifices, because that's what the Torah says, and they are not going to deviate from that. Those people would say there weren't enough people until after Moses for there even to be an issue of priests, because when we went down to Egypt, there were 70 of us. When we left Egypt, there were hundreds of thousands of us. So if there were 70 of us, then the families get together and they offer up a sacrifice. Once they come out of Egypt, hundreds of years later, then they have to have a place and a group that offer it. And I get that. I believe that yes, there were priests that offered sacrifices. There were Levites that offered sacrifices. And at the time, there were also individuals who just went in their backyard and offered up sacrifices. But I think that based on the archaeology, based on the text, based on everything else, from about 500, 550 to about 500 years later, maybe 400 years later, there's only Jerusalem. And everybody's cool with it. There's no fighting about it. Everybody's on the same page. We're all worshiping in Jerusalem, and the priests are okay. And there's only priests, and that's it.
God said we need to formalize.
Well, God had already formalized it, and the Torah was formalized. I think that's the key, is that by 500, Torah is formalized, and the text is in front of us, and people don't argue with the text. But in 1000, the text probably didn't exist, right? During the time of Solomon, there was no text for them to look at. There probably wasn't a text for them to look at until about 500 or 600 BC. You can make that argument. That's definitely what some people would say. Yeah. Now, without being too confused, and I will tell you that there were a group of people who did not believe that Jerusalem was where you offered sacrifices, and they never gave up on that. And actually, they still exist, and they still don't believe you have to go to Jerusalem to give sacrifices. There are about 500 of them in Israel today, and they are not a factor, and they haven't been a factor for about 2,000 years. But during the time that I'm talking about, when most Jews agreed that we all go to Jerusalem, they didn't go to Jerusalem. Mike, what were they called? The Samaritans. The Samaritans. The Samaritans. And these Samaritans still believed that they could go to their mountain, which was Mount Gerizim, and they offered up sacrifices there. There's not a lot of them left, but there were a few thousand of them alive by the time of Jesus. But they were northern Israelites. They're northern Israelites. They're the descendants of the northern Israelites who never believed that they had to go to Jerusalem.
But are there any good?
That's the question that Jesus asked. Because by the time of Jesus, he could write a whole parable about the Good Samaritan. And the reason why he wrote the parable was because the rest of the people that he's talking about don't like Samaritans. And the only reason that the story works is because there's a Good Samaritan, Jesus. Trust me. Jesus is saying, trust me. There's a Good Samaritan out there. There's one or two Good Samaritans. Don't think that they can't be. Yeah, but it only works. It only works if your impression of them, if your mindset is going to be that they're not good. That's the only reason it works.
Yep.
Because the Samaritan is the hero of the story. And so Jesus is teaching, maybe there are good people out there that you don't expect them to be good.
Now, you know that before you did Bible study?
No.
No, but he doesn't.
Talked about it many times here, but no, I never.
Did you know?
But I love the story. I love Samaritans because we don't know a lot about them.
Have you ever met one when you've been to Israel?
I have, but not many. I mean, not every trip.
Were they good?
This guy seemed okay to me. The Samaritan, but remember, we'll talk about the Samaritans, and remember, the Samaritans are not, they were not, we did not look highly upon them by, because we thought, that they were, we thought that they were not, here, I'll show you.
Sacrifices.
The Samaritans to this moment will do sacrifices.
Of what?
Goats. They'll do goats. But it's a great midrash. It's a great legend that Jesus used, and it works because they were not expected to be good. I just want to show you one thing since we talked about Samaritans.
That's a good little tidbit. You can't hold those back.
I'm not going to hold him back. I will tell you that every year or so we get to talk about Samaritans, right, Mike?
Oh, yeah.
I find a way to work him in because most people don't talk about them.
I know most people don't know where that term.
Right. I had no idea. You were in law school.
Well, I love the idea of the Samaritan. The Samaritans? No. So this is the statue of the Good Samaritan at Loma Linda. This is at Loma Linda. This is at Loma Linda out in Riverside, right? So here's the statue. In the story that Jesus tells, the midrash he tells, that there's a sick person, an injured person by the side of the road. And who walks past him? A Kohen walks past him, a priest walks past him, and there's one of the priests and the Levites walk past him, and then the Samaritan walks past him and he comforts him. Right? Right? The Samaritan, the third guy is the Samaritan, the one you don't expect him to do it, right? So there's the priest and the Levite, the wealthy guy. And then there's the Samaritan who actually comforts the guy. Look who they made the Samaritan. Loma Linda. Oh, it's clearly an African-American dude.
Okay.
This is the way they did the statue. It's a beautiful statue, but in their midrash, they're actually teaching a civic lesson, American cultural lesson, because when this statue was built in the 60s, 70s, they were teaching a lesson. Interesting, right? They made the Samaritan the African-American guy. Anyways, it's an interesting lesson. It's one of those examples of again, a story that Jesus tells, a mashal, a parable. We call a mashal, a parable, which has a really important lesson, which is again, never count out a group of people. And it's very similar to the Jewish stories from the same time. Every group has a good person in them, right? So
Even in this room.
there's a good person. I'm not going to say who it is. It's Joyce. It's Joyce. No, it's Joyce. Anyways, so Adonai. So chapter 31 begins. Adonai spoke to Moses saying, see, I've singled out Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and I've endowed him with divine spirit of skill, ability, and knowledge in every kind of craft to make designs for work in gold, silver, and copper, to cut stones for setting and to carve wood, to work in every kind of craft. So Bezalel is the craftsman, and he's the guy who works in metals. He works in all types of.
You know nothing about him, right?
Well, we know he's from the tribe of Judah.
Right, that's it.
What's interesting today, if you want to go to Israel to study art in Israel, you go to the Bezalel Academy of Arts, Art and Design. There. So established in 1906, Bezalel is proud to be recognized as Israel's preeminent academic institution for art, design, and architecture, pioneering originality, creativity, and innovation. So here's the Institute of Art in Israel, which is called Bezalel. There you go. So now you know that if you want to study art in Israel, you go to Bezalel, named after that guy. And he's given, it says, divine insight on how to craft these things. So it's a gift from God that he gets in order to learn how to do this, to know this stuff. But we don't know much about him other than his name, by the way, it means in the divine image, or divine image.
Imagine what it said back then. Moses came down. He said,
Yeah. God tells him, I've already picked this guy out. So he went up to him and says, God's already put this all in your mind. You know how to do it. And he goes, really? He goes, yeah, God gave you this ability to do it. So, there's a lot of great artists that have studied at Bezalel in the last 100 years. A lot of designer. It's essentially, Israel's a small country, small design institute. One of the people that studied there in about 1950 something and he's still alive. He's still hanging in there. Peter Max, the artist.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was a Jew who fled from Germany in the 1930s with his family. He went to live in Shanghai during the war, and then he escaped to Shanghai, and then the family moved to Israel right after the war. He was already very well known by now. Peter Max? No, that's what's it called? That's Max Brenner. That's the back. No, you know who Peter Max is?
I do.
You know who Peter Max is. He's still alive. He's well known for his ability to market his stuff. They always sell his stuff because most of it, unfortunately, we have no idea how much is fake. But he's been doing pop art since the 60s. There's Peter Max. He's still with us. But here's his stuff, kind of the stuff you remember from the Beatles. Yeah. So his stuff is there. So he actually studied at Bezalel. He still occasionally will crank out some Jewish themed art too. But yeah, he studied at Bezalel. But again, Bezalel isn't an artist. He could have been just some average Joe that God touched and said, hey, you're the guy who's going to do all the design work. But we assume he had some innate skill to begin with. It's just that God tapped him for it. Look, it's interesting because we already have all the directions, and now God says, I'm having Bezalel do all the craftsmanship. Now, usually when we build something, we hire the craftsman, we hire the contractor, whatever, and then we give him the work to do, the scope of the work. In this case, God gave the scope of work, and then, according to this, picked out Bezalel to do it. So there's a little bit of a different approach to this, which of course is, God does it because this is not Bezalel's idea. No one should ever think that Bezalel had the idea of how to build the ark. It's clearly God's, and then they brought in Bezalel, right? So Bezalel is literally just hammering out what God tells him to do. So this was not like some private initiative of an artist. So God gave him this skill and this, if you will, how to actually do it. So when people say, well, how did he know? And it says, moreover, I have assigned to him Oholiab, the son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan. I've also granted skill to all who are skillful, that they make everything that I have commanded you. The tent of meeting, the ark of the pact, and the cover upon it, and all the furnishings of the tent, the table, its utensils, the pure lampstand, and all its fittings, the altar of incense, the altar of burnt offering, and all its utensils, and the laver and its stand, the service vestments, the sacral vestments of Aaron the priest, and the vestments of his sons for the service as priests, as well as the anointing oil, the aromatic incense for the sanctuary, just as I have commanded you to do. And that's literally, again, what was just laid out for us. Not quite exactly in that order, but pretty close. Starting off with the ark, the ark and the table utensils, the menorah, the altars, the vestments, the clothing, right, that they use, the ephod and all that stuff that we read about, the hat, the turban, all the way down to his breeches, and all the oils and stuff. So that's the line, folks. It says, all of this you shall make. Now, we're going to actually read it in another few chapters that they actually build it. But right now that's kind of where that part ends. Well, kind of, because here it says something really interesting. And Adonai said to Moses, speak to the Israelite people and say, nevertheless, you must keep my Sabbaths, for this is a sign between me and you throughout the ages, yet you may know that I, Adonai, have consecrated you. You shall keep the Sabbath, for it is holy for you. One who profanes it shall be put to death. Whoever does work on it, that person shall be cut off from his kin. 6 days work may be done, but on the seventh day there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest, holy to Adonai. Whoever does work on the Sabbath day shall be put to death. So there's a fairly strict commandment on the Shabbat, which we already learned about. So this is all pretty strict stuff. This is all pretty strict stuff from 11 till 15 or 12 through 15. That's pretty harrowing. But it's, keep Shabbat. Now it says, the Israelite people shall keep the Sabbath, observing the Sabbath throughout the ages for a covenant of all time. It shall be a sign for all time between me and the people of Israel. For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day God ceased from work and was refreshed. Sounds really nice, much nicer than the previous few verses, which is one of the reasons why when we think about Shabbat and when we think about how important it is, we don't do this part. Sheshet yamim asar Adonai malacham, kol aseh malacha b'yom haShabbat mot yumat, shall surely be put to death. We do, however, read this part. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et haShabbat. That's v'shamru. Now, it sounds a lot better than the previous part. So we didn't sing this. We don't sing this part. You shall surely be put to death. But we do look at it as a gift that God gave us as a covenant, as a sign throughout the ages, right? It says, "Vayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash," right there, that the Sabbath came, and it is a beautiful idea. And of course, it's a beautiful idea because up here it talks about the fact that you have to keep the Sabbath and you have to keep it throughout the ages. But right here, we actually get to the point, which is that it's a breed, it's a covenant. It's a covenant throughout the ages.
Times
Yeah.
the Torah is Shabbat
Mentioned, I think about 20 times. It's a very important concept. No other holiday is mentioned as much. It's clearly, in this case, what? No other commandment is kind of laid out in this many. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I mean, you can make the argument that if you added up all the sacrifices, but yes, if you consider them all a sacrifice, but yeah, as far as an actual ritual commandment, Shabbat is the most. Now, here it doesn't really say what you're supposed to do other than not working, right? But it's very clear that by not working, we're imitating God. Because in the part that we sing from Vishamru, it says, for in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day God ceased from work and was refreshed, which is the translation that this has for verse 17. What is Mary, what does yours say for, and with Vayinafash, what is, I don't think that's probably what it said. Refresh, same one? Good. What about you, Glory? What does yours say?
On the seventh day, he abstained from work and rested.
Yeah. It's not quite as poetic and as flowery as was refreshed.
Same thing though.
Well, other than the fact that if God actually refreshed is probably a more is a better translation from the standpoint of
Didn't watch college football.
no. Well, I guess you could argue that if that gave your soul refreshment,
Absolutely.
because the word vayinafash,
Turn the TV on.
vayinafash, he's watching games from the future
Yeah.
or from the past. But vayinafash means literally, it comes from the same root as nefesh, spirit, got reinvigorated, which is why refreshed is a good translation. It's not just a matter of stopping. It's a matter of having your soul come back to you. Now, look, if you get that out of football, great. But I'll tell you one thing, one of the reasons why I, for years and years and years, gave up watching college football, which in a way is obviously more fun than regular pro football, whatever you want to call it, the professional game. But I didn't want to get bummed out. What do I want to watch sports on Shabbat if I get excited and then get disappointed? Now, John doesn't get disappointed in sports. He doesn't care. He says these people don't care about him. He doesn't care about them. That's his line, right? He doesn't get bent out of shape about sports.
Couldn't care less.
But people sometimes get bent out of shape about sports. I'm not saying unless your kids are playing, right? Which is one of the reasons why I didn't want my kids to play sports, because I would have really got bent out of shape too. If I watched my kids playing sports on Shabbat, I would have really got bent out of shape. And they know that, and I know that, and everybody knows that. So we didn't do it because we didn't want to get bent out of shape. Because as much as it would be fun, it might not always be fun. And so it was a decision we made not to watch sports, participate in sports, get into sports on Shabbat. And it usually was like, once I made that decision, I just stopped watching college football unless it was at night or during the during the bowl games, in which case I never really knew what was going on the last 20 something years. And then whatever, I don't, I like it, but it's not like I really know what's going on.
So what's your most refreshing Shabbat, if you had to choose?
Probably what I guess you kind of fall into what you do, which is, I usually, if it's the summer, that's a lie. Almost all year round, even in the rain, I like to go out in the jacuzzi. That's my Shabbat. So that's almost every Shabbat. I would say the only time I don't do that is if it's broken. If the jacuzzi's broken, then I don't do it. But other than that,
Yeah.
no, it's not 50 minutes for me. No, I mean, it could be 40 degrees this weekend, and I'll go in the jacuzzi in the water, in the rain. I love it. To me, that's refreshing.
How long would you sit there?
Probably, no, I'd probably do like 20, 30 minutes on Friday night, but on Saturday, a couple hours. So I'll go in usually, I think, 2. So we're on our third,
How warm do you keep it?
103.
Of you?
What if you're a lobster?
Well, that's not that hot, is it?
Yeah.
No, come on. Your body temperature is 98.6. Don't still make it. Come on. I'm not that weird. 103, 104 is, I think it goes to 104. Whatever. I get it to 103. But I will tell you, we got finally, I have an app now on my phone. Took me until I think 4 or 5 months ago. This summer, was our last motor went out. I finally got a thing on my phone that I can turn it on remotely. I never had that. I never was that fancy. And I should have splurged on myself for that. But I didn't want to get a new,
Oh, because you have the heaters up.
yeah.
Oh, mine's above ground. Totally fine.
Yeah, well, would be good, but I have it attached to a pool that I never use. My pool is it's like when you don't really want to eat the entree, but you want to have dessert. That's what it is. I don't want to eat that. But no, that's refreshing for me. And also, just again, resting, to me that, I sleep every Shabbat, unless I'm unfortunately going from a bar mitzvah to something else. I always rest on Shabbat. I always have a nap. My body, it's so weird. My body knows that I'm going to have a nap, and I what? Do always.
We had a fix in our garage.
Oh wow,
Portable,
yeah.
and every Saturday it's going.
And you like that? Yeah, that was a
I
yeah.
miss that so much.
Yeah. To me, those two things: a nap and what?
We also
Yeah.
talk about how we divert from.
That came from.
No, but so that came from refreshed. From Vayina Fash. How does your soul come back to you? I will tell you that in my estimation, it's one of the most I have two things that I did in my life that, gave me a better life. One of them was, I believe, was being vegetarian. The other was, okay, thank you, Glory. Thanks, Glory. No, but I mean, things that I had to alter my life for.
You have to alter your life for marriage.
Interestingly, I was married to Tracy before I made both of these alterations.
Right, because you said you wouldn't be a rabbi unless you agreed.
Yeah, I wouldn't have done it. And I wouldn't have kept Shabbat probably with the same devotion to it if I hadn't, if I hadn't gone and become, if I hadn't become a rabbi, I probably wouldn't have taken it as seriously. But I do think that also had an issue for me, which was if my kids did sports on Saturdays, or if I did stuff on Saturdays, then I would be like, then I'm not really keeping Shabbat. And then I'm basically telling the rest of the community it's not important to keep Shabbat. So I think that was part of it. But I started keeping Shabbat before I was here, before I was in Santa Clarita. So I mean, I started when I was in New York, when I was in rabbinical school. But I think that and I became vegetarian around that time too, 95, 96, 95. So I did those were the two biggest changes that I made. But I think that it made my life better. I know Shabbat did. I don't know. I mean, who knows whether the being a vegetarian did, because it's one of those questions of whether you're what? No, but she always ate less meat than she always ate better than I did. And she always ate better food than I did. But I think those two things both came out of Jewish tradition. They both helped my life. I don't think that it's one of those things like, how do you know? But I do know that the level that both of us work, that if we didn't have Shabbat, we'd probably have been burned out a long time ago. So, for her, and she travels a lot for work, it's one of the days that we didn't, that our family knew that we were going to be together, which I think also sets a message to the kids that say, we really do think it's important for us to be together as a family. So you can only do it if you actually do it. So some people say, well, you have to do it every week. Like you have to institute it so that you did. And I said, well, we did, because otherwise, like who decides what's important or not enough to do? So if you don't say, well, we do, that's what we do, then you just go, well, I'm just going to go do whatever I want to do, because this is important today. So we never we don't do it. So it's for us, we've never regretted that. We never regretted it.
Always said, you do what you can.
Yeah.
What he told us at the congregation, you do what you can.
Yes.
And that, if you think about it,
yes, but the issue for me, at least as far as keeping Shabbat, was that, especially when our kids were growing up, is that if we sent a message to them that, no, we can do this on Shabbat, you can't do it. So then it's what do you value? Like, is your decision to do this on Shabbat more important than mine? Like if I had said to my kids, well, I don't watch anything on Shabbat except for Vikings, which, by the way, only happens in the end of the season when the playoffs go into Saturdays and Sundays. And there were Saturdays and Sundays that I didn't watch football. My kids knew I wanted to, but they also knew that if I was willing to do that, then if I really gave up something that I did want to do on that day, they knew that it was important, and they weren't going to hit me with something in my mind, which would have been stupid for them to do. Like going to a Harry Styles concert on a Saturday. They never hit me with it.
Wednesday night during
I ain't going. Anyways, but by the way, I'm not. That's not a thing, and it's not like I'm not degrading that. You asked the question. That's why I did.
Rabbi Shimon was Orthodox. I mean, he didn't do anything on Saturday.
Yeah.
But he said, you don't have to do what I do. You have to do what is right.
I would only tell people that
And then say, plus, do what you can.
okay, well,
Do one thing more than.
that's important too.
He did say that.
That's important. You left that part out.
I did.
That's important. No, but you got to push yourself a little bit more. Yeah, that's true.
Very big
What?
to rest.
Oh, really? Okay, well, wait, John, you're 100% right. For some people, they needed to know, right? They needed to know, well, yeah, I rest from Shabbat. You made a very important point, which is what is it here for? And I almost went on. And Mike Schwartz probably knows what I'm going to now share. So we have this list of things that we do for the tabernacle, right? And so the Torah then tells us to keep Shabbat. And so the rabbis derived from this, and I will now share up from the Chabad.org website, the 39 malachot, or they would say the 39 malachos, which are the categories of labor that are forbidden on Shabbat. Each of these categories include a range of derivative laws and activities, some of which are described as the Shabbat laws. The malachot are generally divided into 6 groups, classified according to the Mishkan's activities which they were associated. So what did the rabbi say? We get this reminder to keep Shabbat and not to do any work, because even for the tabernacle we don't work on Shabbat. So what did they use for the malachot? Well, any of these kinds of things in the field, these would have been used for creating the challah, the bread, and the can't do any of these things. Can't do any field work. Can't do any of those things. Well, we can't make any of the materials for making the Mishkan. So most of these things we look at and we go, oh yeah, I can't do any of those things because holy moly, can't do any of that. But holy moly, if I can't sew and I can't tear,
You have to put slip-on shoes.
what do I do? Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, if I can't tear, how do I tear my toilet paper? So they pre-tear it. People tear it before Shabbat. If you go into a religious, observant person, keeps Shabbat, you will go into their toilet and you will find pre-cut pieces of toilet paper, which is not what most people want to see in the bathroom. You say, where the heck am I? I'm in a really bad bathroom. Yeah, just know they're not doing that because they're not good hosts. They're doing that because they don't want you to violate Shabbat by having to tear the toilet paper. And so people would pre-tear, or you can buy those little sheets that, you get at a really cheap bathroom somewhere. I don't even know who does that anymore, but it was like one of those ways that they try to keep people from using up too much toilet paper. Yeah, so you don't tear it. So that is probably one of the more easy to break laws of just, you think about how many things you tear during the day. But again, look at all this stuff here, like baking, that's pretty much cooking a lot of stuff that you would make on Shabbat, right? So we don't cook, right?
Interesting.
So now we have making leather curtains. Well, most of us don't do any of this stuff anymore.
No.
We don't do this stuff. We don't do that. But riding and erasing, oh my gosh, because they would have had to do that, right? They would have had to write on the pieces of stuff that they were building, right?
Okay, it said cooking up there.
Yeah.
I know more than one person, like 4 or 5 people that are very religious.
Yeah.
And keep a burner on.
Yeah.
That's,
But keeping a burner on is different.
but they're cooking.
But they
They're gonna
didn't.
boil eggs or whatever.
But they
they're
didn't
warming.
start the fire. And it said, by the way, they're baking, which is a little different than what you do on a stove, a hot plate, if you will, which technically speaking, they didn't turn on. But there's definitely a level to cooking, which is basically reheating stuff, heating stuff. Yes.
I bet you anybody on this call, if you said to the people and they said, well, gosh, God will forgive me, right? But now I'm starting to look at this and thinking, my gosh, if I don't honor Shabbat, he's gonna kill me. So, right? So I'm thinking maybe when I get up there, he's not gonna forgive me. For trying to get long ago.
So,
No, not here. I'm just saying, right? I mean, it's so. I'm just saying.
so clearly there is, there was a time when people look, these lists of law, or let's finish them first. We're not done yet. Because we got to these ones mean you pretty much can't do any work at home,
Right.
right? Or you couldn't write. Question of whether you could use a computer, what?
Didn't say it, a scorecard on golf.
Nope. But here would be the really tough ones. Building and demolishing, well, we don't have to do that, right? But these ones, the final touchers,
Sharing.
holy moly, holy moly. Extinguishing a fire, kindling a fire, striking a final hammer blow, which one can make the argument, well, what about the rest of the hammering? Well, definitely, but if you do anything even to finish the work,
Carrying is it, that's it.
right?
No, you're
Striking, look, but look here, striking, so this is completing something. So striking a final blow also can include other things of not doing.
I didn't see anywhere where it says you can't play golf.
No, but you can't carry.
Yeah.
No, but you have a caddy.
Well, you can't make somebody else, you can't make, so these are all things that come from this law of not doing the final nail. So these are other things that the Talmud then goes on to say, the things that you can't do,
What
right?
about fishing?
You're carrying a fishing rod.
What about like exercise, running or?
So let's get to those, right? So extinguishing fire, kindling fire, those make sense. So you can have the fire already burning, but you can't kindle a new fire and you can't extinguish a fire that's already going. So that's part of the problem. You can't turn the fire off. If you have a fire that's going in your house, you're putting it out. But I'm saying if you have a fire on your stove, you can't put it out.
Exercise.
Well, wait, we'll get to that one. So I didn't get to, so the last one, the 39th one is a tough one. That's carrying, right? So carrying is a tough one because carrying you do all the time. I carry stuff over all the time. So the rabbis actually took this one and made kind of a clarifying, well, they made a clarifying issue, which is carrying stuff around your house is fine. But carrying something from your house to another person's house, or carrying something from your house to work, or carrying something from your house to the synagogue is not okay. Because then you're not moving it from one place to another, which is just normal stuff, but you're actually bringing it, you're taking it with you. And it definitely would constitute carrying if you moved it from a sphere that we would say is a public sphere or a private sphere to a public sphere, or public sphere to a private sphere. Then you're carrying. Well, wait, you can get real minute in a second. Yeah.
I'm walking to synagogue on a Saturday morning.
Yep.
And it's cold.
Yep.
So I have a jacket on.
Yep.
Leaving is 75 degrees, it's warm. I can't carry my coat.
No, if it's part of your clothes, you're okay. It's not, you're not,
But I'm carrying it though, because then.
I understand, but it's your clothes and you had it on and you put it on. It's not, that's not like you're carrying an object.
Okay.
But carrying an object is very serious, including keys, including a stroller, including a backpack. Those are not parts of your clothing.
Carrying a child.
Carrying a child is not an object. A child's not an object. Carrying a person, carrying a child
They're
isn't.
not a person yet, are they?
So you can put them in a baby, Bjorn.
For the Bible, they're not a person. So-
Well, no, they're a person. They're not in their uterus, in your uterus. No, once the kid's a kid. They're,
That's just, the way it is. You're pregnant.
well, that's not carrying. That's inside your body. If it's inside your body, I guess it doesn't count. I guess, John, if you want to put a zipper on your body, I guess it would. But no, carrying that's an interesting one. I never heard carrying a fetus. No, carrying an object.
I think
So-
John
so-
was alluding to the first 8 days of the child's life.
No. He's talking about a fetus.
I don't think so.
He was talking about the fetus. He was talking about a fetus not being considered a life yet. So he said, a mother, I know what he's saying. He's being Talmudic. He was using his Talmudic mind. Now, here we go with a key though, right? So here's an interesting one with a key. Carrying a key would be considered a problem. So some people, in order to get around this key rule, is they actually create a buckle or a button or something on their clothes. It's really a buckle, and they'll use the key as the buckle. So as long as the key is like the piece, let's say it's on your shoe, or it's really around a strap on your arm. As long as that key is functioning that way, it's okay. Because it's part, so that's a way that some people have gotten around using a key. That's one thing. Now, by the way, just so you know, this is still, I just want you to know that this is still an issue for people. So carrying a key is one thing. Pushing a stroller is another thing, because people say, hey, how can you push a stroller? So it was a big issue, and people, when they are carrying things like that, by the way, including, what about your tallis? I'm taking my tallis from one place to another. That's not part of your regular garments, right? That's not your clothes. You can't say it's clothes. You have a tzitzit on, but if you're carrying a tallis for Shabbos, right? Your prayer shawl that you have, because they'll have tzitzit, but they'll also use a tallis, right? If you're carrying a tallis, so some people would keep a tallis at synagogue and they would never leave it, which is why, like at my wife's shul, my wife's family shul in England, they have a place where they keep their tallis. They have a little locker. Now you say, well, it's Shabbat. Well, it's not locked, but it's in their seat. And they lift up their seat, they put their tallis in their prayer book in, they're not carrying it. But there's another way we got around it. And that was to create what's called an eruv. And an eruv, we have eruvs, we don't have a Santa Clarita eruv yet. When they have a Santa Clarita eruv, then I will be shocked. But this is one of the things that I will show you, that they're all over the place in LA, and you just have to look up occasionally to see them. So here's an eruv. Well, there's an eruv. I'll just show you. Here's an eruv around Manhattan. This is an eruv that is all around Manhattan. What's an eruv? It's a wire that is used to create a legal fiction, which allows people to say that as long as they are walking where the eruv is, they're not carrying from a public to a private sphere. So this eruv goes all around Manhattan. This is it. This is not. This is
your house boundary?
Well, it's your sphere. So there are eruvs all over the place. People. I know. So here's one in Los Angeles. I'll show you one that's a little closer to Los Angeles. Here's one in Encino. Here is, I don't know I don't know if this one's the one in LA, but there's a section of it. You can barely see it. But so what this does again is it creates a private domain. Eruv Orthodox Jews can carry or push a pram or wheelchair. So
Within that area.
Yep.
Do you have to get a building permit for it?
You have to get a kind of a permit for it. Yeah, you have to get a permit from the city. So here's eruvim that are in different parts of New York. These ones are all in Brooklyn. So these are eruvim that create spaces that people can walk within that space, and they can carry stuff. Yeah, they can carry.
The one up top, the one that's Williamsburg, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So you've got this is around.
That's how my great-grandfather.
This is Park Slope. This is like Flatbush down here.
My great-grandfather was.
So you're allowed to carry. So these duties are like carrying house keys, tissues, medicines, or using strollers to push babies around. So carrying stuff is alleviated by
Within that
within the
area.
eruv. So and again, these are all around, and I like I said, I wanted you to see.
God, I mean, come on.
Well, it's not fooling God. It's not fooling God. It's allowing Jews to
Like you're
it seems,
fooling God.
you know, you wonder where we get some bad names.
So here's the West Valley A-roof.
Oh my God, they have a map.
Oh, there is one in the West Valley.
Yeah,
Is it in West?
Good, I'm glad.
no, it's in Encino.
I'm going to Brent's now.
So,
My God.
so this is,
Gotta go look.
this, well, you can look up, and if you look up Find the wire.
Take a tour.
and showing the A-roof. Oh, yeah. Yes.
No, even I.
So, this is a serious issue for people when they want to live within an A-roof, and they actually, people will buy homes that are within an A-roof and not within an A-roof.
You like, I lived out in West Hill,
Yeah,
and I remember driving on Saturdays.
yeah,
Of course, I was going to synagogue.
yeah,
But you saw the Hasidic walking to synagogue,
yeah.
but a lot of them were carrying their pillows.
Huh?
That's carrying though, right?
Where?
On a Saturday to.
Where? I know where.
In West Hill.
In West Hills, they were inside an A-roof then.
Was there an area
Yeah.
in West Hill?
Yeah, it's just that this one's bigger now.
But they do have one.
Yeah, there's also one in Valley Village. So this allows people to do that. So again, there's a lot of other things in here. Most of these we don't do anymore. Or we don't do them, we don't do them ourselves ever. So this isn't a problem. But
I could have sued Prudential when I was on call Friday nights. You got called in the middle of the night.
to do work, I guess, if you were observant of Shabbos. But yeah, you can see that for people who are gonna follow the 39 malachot, and I'm glad we pointed that out, because I would have gone past it if we hadn't said, well, what about the 39 malachot? What are those things? Now everybody knows it. So you know now what it is. Yeah, what are the rules? So people, it's been a while, but we have, but it is stuff that where people sometimes, again, and again, if you have that kind of mind, or if you have a mind where you want to know, well, I got to know what the rules are, right, John? Then you get the rules, and those are the rules. So that is the purpose. Wait a second, but that's the purpose of the Talmud. Those laws are found in the Talmud. So the Talmud is an explanation. It, like John said, it says, I want to know what the rules are, because it says not to work. And John says, I want to know what the rules are. So they literally went back and they said, look what we just read. Look at all the things we just read. Well, let's go through. Well, you can't die, you can't measure, you can't. And they went through it all. And they said, well, those are all things we can't do. Because if God says we can't do any of that work on Shabbos, then we can't do any of this stuff. Now, Gloria asked the question, what about exercise? So it's an interesting question, because clearly there's a boundary between walking to synagogue and
Doing push-ups.
doing work that would be considered work. So it's interesting because as some of you said, as John, Mike, we're talking about golfing. So should golfing be allowed on Shabbos? Now, obviously somebody who's going to follow Jewish law strictly, striking a golf ball is like hitting something, right? It's like,
They put it around Wilshire.
yeah, but it's the striking of it. It's not the carrying business. It's the actual hitting of the ball. It's actually, so then we get into another issue, which is more based on, which is based on something we read earlier in a description of Shabbat, which is, it says in Exodus chapter 16, which was the first time we heard about Shabbat, the Lord gives you Shabbat. This was when we read about the manna, right? That they got the bread. Each man shall stay put and not leave his place on the seventh day. So according to the Talmud, right, what would you be able to do is you're not supposed to go further than 2,000 cubits on Shabbat. As long as you're staying within 2,000 cubits, you're staying put. you're staying in your place.
So you can carry the mana if you find it in within 2,000.
Well, they definitely had it there because the mana was by their house. So this was where this is how far they go for their mana, right? So there's a good question, right? So how far is 2,000 cubits? About 1 kilometer. Okay, so that is, that's a good walk. It's a good walk, but it's about a half a mile or whatever, quite half a mile. What is it? It's one. It's
Or the point seven.
no, it's 1.6 miles to, I think, to a mile, 1.6 kilometers to a mile.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So people, if you walk 2 kilometers, you're walking about a mile and a little more than a mile, but you're walking about a half mile and that's okay. Now, the issue that I would say, Corey, for most people would say is, wow, look at this. This was one of the stones that we found in Babylonia, which tell us where the wow, that's thousands of years old. There's a marker which says how far you would go to be outside of the boundary of where Shabbat was. So people would actually create markers which say we can't go further than this. This is our boundary. We don't.
See, they didn't have wires.
They didn't have wire. Well, you remember the wires for a slightly different purpose. That's allowing us to
Oh, God,
Kilometer is 0.62.
yeah. So here's what it would look like if you went within a city. So these are determining the limits of how far someone could go. Now, here's the question that Glory's getting to. If you walked further than, so how far does someone have to work? How far does someone have to walk in order for them to get a good workout? Now, most of us would say that walking a kilometer is a nice walk, but it's not a workout.
right.
So, most of us would say that. I guess as you get older, as you get, is if you're dealing with pain and fatigue, a kilometer is not that far, is far. But for us, most of us would say we're not really going to work up much of a sweat in a kilometer. So we know that we're not exerting ourselves normally by walking this far, that we're walking, maybe we have to walk that far to walk to shul, but we're not walking that far. So there are people who take this very seriously, and they will not live outside of these boundaries when it comes to where they'll walk to for synagogue, which is why areas like Valley Village near Shari Tzedek Synagogue over in North Hollywood, Valley Village, or in almost every city has one place where even in the suburbs, people say, if you want to walk to synagogue, we have to walk. We can't be further than the Tehum. You can't walk further than that. So that's why property within that area is worth a lot of money. So if you go to Valley Village, you can go outside of the boundaries of where that is, and you'll see that once you get outside of those boundaries, property values go down considerably. But within that synagogue, and the same thing happened in Hancock Park. Hancock Park was always wealthy, but once Orthodox Jews lived in that area, it became super expensive. And it's not because Jews live there; it's because they will pay money to make sure that they could be within walking distance of their synagogue. So it's a supply and demand issue. It's not like well, it's more expensive because Jews live there. It's not. It's because people had to they had to be in walking distance of their shul. So that's how we that's why this is an issue. So so most of us are going to probably not get a very good workout if we follow that on Shabbat. Do people, if they work out on Shabbat, does that go against Shabbos ritual? I don't know. I think, look, one can make the argument, you shouldn't do anything on Shabbat that could possibly give you a heart attack. I'm not saying that every time you work out, you need to work out to the point of exhaustion. But I think there is something to be said for if I'm engaging in really, really heavy cardio, that I did, believe me, I'm not swimming. I'm not swimming. I didn't laugh. I wish I did. I made my pool so that I could conceivably swim a good 40, a good lap, but I didn't really do it. It never materialized. In 25 years, it never materialized. But it's great work. It's great workout. But yeah, you're not supposed to do anything that could on Shabbat that could possibly give you that kind of sweat, if you will. But on the other hand, like if you take a walk, if you some people say, well, what about riding a bike? Well, riding a bike is a little problematic because it's considered to be, well, number one, you're kind of using a device. You're not necessarily carrying your bike, but you're taking an object, you're moving an object.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things why people would say, well, you're not really supposed to take a bike unless, again, you can make the argument in an Eruv, though some people say you can't use a bike on Shabbat. There definitely are people who say that. But yeah, I mean, you'd think that riding a bike shouldn't really be a problem on Shabbos. I mean, I've done biking. I've done I know a few times, we were like by a lake or something, that we would go out on a kayak or a little canoe or whatever on Shabbos. But I think that most people would say, look, if it's something where you're really, if you're really hurting yourself or possibly, going to give yourself a heart attack, probably not a good idea. Yes.
We've talked about this before, but what is the reason why the Talmud says that you as a rabbi can work on Shabbat?
So that's a good question. How
We've discussed this before.
Yeah, so we have talked about it before. So how could somebody essentially being a rabbi be employed and to work on Shabbos when you're not supposed to? No one's supposed to work on Shabbos, and arguably that's the day that you work the most. There's no question that some rabbis really do look at Shabbos as a work day. I mean, it's hard not to. I mean, because you have an obligation on that day. Look, there's part of the issue is this. That's a modern thing. Rabbis didn't work on Shabbos because, as I told you before, they didn't lead services. They didn't preach. They were lawyers. They were judges. They didn't work on Shabbos. Nobody worked on Shabbos because if you were in a synagogue on Shabbos 200 years ago, anybody could have gotten up and led prayer. Anybody could have gotten up and read the Torah. Now, usually people wanted to have someone with a nice voice do it. That was the chazan. The chazan was the guy who got up and read it. And somebody else would come up and read part of the service, and somebody else would do, another part of the service. And the person read the Torah, and another person read the Haftarah. And the kid whose bar mitzvah it was would get up with his dad, and he would have him read the Torah. And that was the bar mitzvah. Now, clearly, that's not the case anymore. So one would argue that, like, how can you justify, even in an Orthodox synagogue, that the rabbi isn't working on that day? Any Orthodox synagogue, Chabad, Orthodox, whatever, every Reform, every conservative, whatever, every rabbi, technically speaking, is working that day. It's not untrue. I mean, how can you say that it's not? I mean, how could you say that they're not working? They're obligated to be there. They're being paid to be there that day. If you didn't come, you were not doing your job. I didn't come today. Well, what are you talking about? We paid you to be here. So how's that not work? So again, from people who look at it from the standpoint of, well, we have to figure out how this would conform with Jewish law, say a more traditional person would say, well, you're not really being paid for that. You're being paid to be there every other day. And Shabbos, you do that because you're a Jew and you come on synagogue on Shabbos like everybody else. But the reality is that, in a non-Orthodox world, I just put it out there, that when a contract would be drawn up, they would say, well, the rabbi gets 4 Shabbos off a year or 5, whatever. So you're actually like proving the point that that's your holiday, that's your vacation. So whatever you want to say, it's like you're not obligated to be there those days. There is something to be said for the fact that this is the world that we have, this is the world that we've created. It's not, I would say this, it's not a good, any solution, any answer that I can give you is not a good answer from the standpoint that it's also a legal fiction. It's not real.
What is the contract like?
Okay, because he'll say that he's being paid to be there 6 days a week, and the seventh day he's already there. I mean, that's what he'll say. There's no logical way that you can say, but that's the day you actually have to be there. That's the day people actually want to see you. That's the day that they actually are coming to see you. So it's a difficult thing to say, and everybody kind of says, but that's not really what's happening. But you can't argue that, right?
Right.
So what I would say is this. What it's reflective of is the idea that in our minds in the 21st century, and for really the 20th century too, the 20th and the 21st century, we have to be honest that we screwed up, and that we literally told as Jews, and I say we, including everybody included, that we literally told the rabbi, and I guess to some extent the cantor, but really the rabbi, that you're our professional Jew. I don't have to be at synagogue, but I'm going to pay to make sure somebody's at synagogue. And that was a really bad decision. It was a really, really bad decision. And it really was, if not the end of the era for Jews to be responsible for themselves, it was, I don't know. I think it was kind of not the nail in the coffin. It was definitely a part of the big part of the problem.
You know, that's unfortunate, because now I'm thinking this through. And it's not just Judaism, but Christianity, Islam, or whatever. Your rabbi, your imam, your priest. It's a very emotionally taxing job, right? Physically as well, I'm sure, because you have to be in so many different places. And it has nothing to do with remuneration either. You need a day of rest. You need a day to unwind, because you're not necessarily going to get that day either, because you could get a call saying, you know what, my sister, my brother is, I can't imagine how many trips you've taken, or any clergy, right? And all of a sudden you find yourself on vacation with Tracy. It's, oh my God, I got to jump on a plane.
Yeah. So that's happened as well. If it's happened like that, it's usually been a really bad situation. And then it doesn't happen a lot, but it happens, and it has happened. But that being said, that is part of it. But to the question of what about this issue, it is this kind of it is I just want to say that this was a bad decision that the Jewish community made to say, no, this guy is the guy, and it was the guy, now it's women, but when they made the decision, it was guys. You're the one that we want. We're paying you to do this. You do the bar mitzvah. You be there with my kid to teach him my kid. 120, 150 years. Since the beginning of the 20th century. So beginning of the 20th century, 1900s. But this idea that you're going to teach my son how to read Hebrew. You're going to teach my son how to read the Torah. Instead of me. It was a very bad decision. It was a very bad decision, and it was made partly because Jews wanted to be like everybody else. They wanted to be like Christians and Protestants and Catholics to some extent, who had professional clergy who did that stuff. And they said, no, we want our guys to do that too. And so that was the decision, and everybody bought into it. The community bought into it, and the rabbis bought into it. The community bought into it because it's much easier to have someone be designated as your person, which is exactly what the priests did, right? The priests were the people who did this. Judaism hasn't had priests for 2,000 years. So we went backwards, and we went back to a priesthood, which quite frankly was not a good situation. It was fairly corrupt. And again, we saw it, we discussed it. We talked about it in the Bible. People didn't like it. People wanted to have the ability to sacrifice themselves. So we're going back to something that people to some extent didn't even want to have. And you ask yourself, well, how did this happen? Because we so badly wanted to assimilate. We so badly wanted to be like everybody else. Part of the problem, though, and I will say, responsibility falls on the rabbinate, because the rabbis who agreed to do this did it because they wanted to have that attention. And so they said, yo, yeah, I'll be the guy. I want to have that attention. I want to have that responsibility. I love the idea of being the designate for my community. And it was a deal with the devil, because it didn't have everybody. Yeah. For the rabbi, it was their ego. And for the congregant, for the people in the synagogue, it was, quite frankly, laziness. And it was this idea of, well, everybody else does it. And it's not the way Judaism's supposed to be done. Judaism's supposed to be hands-on. Judaism's supposed to be every one of us does it.
It's funny, because my father learned more from his grandfather, my great-grandfather, than his own father or the rabbi. So in a way, it was still happening even in the 20s.
Yeah, but your great grandfather, or was it your great great grandfather? Well, your great grandfather was probably born in 1850, 1860.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was born in a previous century.
Yeah.
Right.
He was 40 years old by the time 1900s came. So yeah, he was part of the old country and part of a way where Judaism was hands-on. It was hands-on.
Yeah.
And this deal we made was a bad deal, and we're still paying the price for it. So we have to dig out. We have to dig out from this.
Okay.
But wouldn't it be
Doing it right now.
Get in a time machine and go to a service in the 1700s?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know what it looks like. I want to go back to one from 2,000 years ago when they were first developing synagogues, when synagogues were first the alternative to the priesthood.
Yeah.
I think it's too, and that's why I want to see it. So I think I'm not really sure what that looks like. I'm pretty sure I know what it looked like 300 years ago, but I'm pretty sure I can figure out what I can imagine it, but I can't imagine. I can figure out what that looked like, but I can't figure out what it looked like 2,000 years ago, or even 1,500 years
We have
ago.
enough people in congregation in Hebrew.
Well-
I think it's right, if the rabbis weren't doing it, and Wendy's not going to do it, or the other, right, then we have to, now all of a sudden you have to recruit. people to recreate it. How fun would that be for one
I know,
guy?
so right now, we're at a point where we're talking about the fact that right now we have people who want to do it, and we've had people volunteer to do it, and there's people who like to do it. And, but the Hebrew language is 100% a huge barrier on that, right? So the Hebrew language, knowing Hebrew is a huge barrier for an adult to overcome to be able to do it. And we have to be realistic about that. So that's a tough one.
Synagogues will have rabbis on vacation at the lake wedding.
That's not the issue. The issue is if the service was in English, if the Torah reading was in English, think about how much easier it would be for people to do it. And people would have fun with it. Look, guys, believe me,
Everybody speaks.
correct. But Israel's had a challenge in doing it too, and they're doing a better job of it now. Israel is trying to figure out how to do it. Israel had a different issue, which was that the people who started the country were so anti-religious that they've had to figure out how to get back to it. But yes, you're right. They have an advantage that once they get over that hump, then it's much easier for them to do it. Because for an Israeli to learn how to chant the Torah, it's a matter of learning the melody. It's not, they don't have to figure out how to read it. Yeah, so it's a big challenge. So it is a problem. Look, folks, I don't know I don't have an answer to. Well, the answer is that you cut back on the Hebrew. That's the answer, folks. I mean, you could say, well, we got to teach everybody Hebrew really well, but it's not easy to teach people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s Hebrew to the level. Yeah, but it's really impossible to teach people when our minds start to solidify and we can't, the language doesn't soak into it. I feel so bad for people who haven't learned Hebrew, who are cutting their teeth on it. Even people in their 20s. Look, we know people, people that went to rabbinical school in their 20s and 30s who never knew Hebrew. It's a terrible barrier for people, and I feel terrible about it because because technically speaking, if you decide to go become a priest when you're in your 40s or 50s, it's not easy. You have to totally upend your life and you have a lot of stuff you have to learn, but you don't have to learn. Nowadays, you don't even have to learn Latin, but you don't have to learn another language. It's very hard. I mean, I don't know. I feel terrible about it. I don't, and John, we had this discussion, texting back and forth on it the other day. It's a tough one because on one hand, you don't want to give up Hebrew. You don't want to give up we can't cut off our knowledge of Hebrew. But on the other hand, what are we going to do? I mean, unless we're going to go back and teach everybody figure out some way to teach every kid Hebrew from the time that they're 5 or 6, which I tried, but anyways, this is a problem, yeah, it's a real problem. Anyways, we're going to finish up because we did not get to the 10 Commandments. Because we'll read the next line, folks. We're not going to read the golden calf though, but we are going to read this line right here, which is right after we get the laws of Shabbat. Upon finishing speaking with him on Mount Sinai, God gave Moses the 2 tablets of the pact, stone tablets. It does say 2, right? There it does say 2. Shnei luchot habrit, the two tablets, and luchot ha'evan. Now, by the way, it does not say, if you're reading very carefully, it does not say the 10 Commandments. It says 2 tablets. Yeah, it does say finger of God. You're absolutely right. Right. So it's God wrote those. But here's the thing. It says 2 tablets of the pact. It does not say 10 Commandments. So the idea that Moses came down with 2 tablets with like 5 commandments on each side. That's the thing you saw in DeMille, and we saw it with Mel Brooks. You saw Mel Brooks coming down. That's not what it says.
No, it doesn't.
Not only that,
It is the pact, the covenant.
Fact
between
is
us and-
capitalized, so it obviously has a meaning.
well, that's the law, right? But it doesn't say the 10 Commandments. Now, we always think that it does because we just got the 10 Commandments. But that's not maybe what it was.
Is that what it says in there?
In the regular part, it says, he gave them the 2 tablets of the testimony, the tablets of stone inscribed by the hand of God. But my note,
Uh-huh.
in keeping with ancient Near Eastern practice, these were duplicates of the covenant document, not 2 sections of the 10 Commandments.
Oh,
1 copy belonged to each party of the covenant. Since Israel's copy was to be laid up in the presence of her God, both covenant tablets were placed in the ark.
Interesting.
no.
So Glory's went even further, which is, I was going to get to that point, but it's an interesting one too, which is that the 2 tablets are not 5 and 5,
Yeah.
4 and 6, but they're actually 2 copies of the same thing, which are God's copies and our copies, the signed copies. Well, not signed copies, but they're signed by God. So God is saying, you hold my copy. Because whenever you came up with, in the ancient world, whenever you came up with a brit, an agreement, it's a legal document. And you had to have one for both parties. So you could say, well, doesn't God keep his copy? And he does. He says, I keep my copy with your copy in the ark, which is our place.
Those 2 tablets that we're talking about get broken.
Well, you ruined the story, Mike. Mike, we're gonna get to it, but yeah, you're right. But here's the other thing. So Glory's point there was that, that these are the 2 tablets. And again, you have this, just so you know, what was in my bedroom as a kid was this picture right here. So you can see that this is what I had. I had Rembrandt's picture of the 10 Commandments in my room. Kind of weird kid I was, but I'm talking, I was like 4 or 5. I had that. I remember it all the time. I had that, and I had a picture of Lincoln.
But it's one.
Isn't that weird? I'm a weird kid. Man.
It's not 2.
I didn't have like, you probably had a poster of Leif Garrett in your room. I had
That was generate.
what was you? David, whatever, it's pretty close. So I had that in my room, but I had this, but I don't know, I like the painting. And again, so most people have that, but they have this image that the commandments look like this, right? Well, that's in English. It definitely didn't look like that. Which one? Yeah. Yeah, that's in English. So here's somebody who had an interesting idea. Let's make it more like a cube. Because we don't know that they're tablets like this. We don't know that they look like that or even like this. But this at least kind of follows the idea that that they were written on tables of stone or something like a rectangle. But in reality, of course, it says that it is
Well, if the Ethiopians would ever let us into that building.
we get to see it. So again, is this the 10 Commandments or is this everything that we just read that included all that holiness code and all the other commandments we're supposed to keep? Because it doesn't really seem like the 10 Commandments are the only things that were on this.
It'd be like microfiche then.
Well, it actually could be very similar to other things that we found in the ancient world. And again, I'll just show you a quick picture of it. We found tablets of that are actually maybe more of what this looked like, which is
Moses had to have taken notes. Right? They had writing utensils, they had things to write in.
Yeah.
Stone meant to be a little bit more permanent. Maybe he took notes with it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here.
Yeah, but this says it's written by God. But look at these. I mean, these are cylinders that we found that in many cases are law codes. And it could be that, that it looked more like this, in which case there could have been this idea that rather than be like stone tablets that are rectangles, it says that they're luchot, that they are things that were written on. But the things that are written on, this could be this cylinder was a way that people wrote. And so it's very possible that when they were put in the ark, that these are what was put in the ark, something that looked more like this. And so the idea that it was written on both sides is something that we'll read about when we get to the 10 Commandments, get to the ones that Mike already ruined the story for us, that they're going to get broken, but they don't. But of course, we do get a new set. But Glory's translation, the commentary was really an important one, because it does tell us that there probably were, rather than two different sets of rules, that there actually were two copies of the same rules, which were just, one for God and one for us. So that makes a lot of sense. And it probably, again, is reflective of this idea that there was a cylinder with the same thing on both. Now, the interesting thing about some of these cylinders, right, is that when you would have the cylinder, they were engraved, right? When you took a piece of clay and it was a wet piece of clay, you'd roll the cylinder and there's your copy of it.
Oh,
And you can make numerous copies.
we translated those cylinders.
Yeah, so some of them
And
are,
is it agreement between us
Yeah,
and God?
well, not those ones. Those ones were from Samaria, but it's very likely
It's legal document.
that's what it was. It's very likely, most of those were legal documents. So it's very likely that this was a legal document like that, which also could be rolled out. Well, he didn't have to necessarily, they could hire a scribe, just like they hire a you're not supposed to call them secretaries anymore. Stenographer, yeah. Yeah, he had a guy next to him, paralegal. When you have a guy next to you that's writing the stuff for you, you have a scribe. So it could be that, again, you didn't have to write it yourself, but in this case, it says that God wrote it.
With his
So
finger.
we are going to pick up next week with this wonderful story, which is the story of Moses coming down late and the creation of the golden calf, chapter 32. One of the most famous and problematic moments.
Okay.
I wouldn't just say famous, one of the darkest chapters in Jewish history.
We don't
The
know.
day-
This is another thing. You can't tell kids the Ten Commandments weren't on the.
Why? Because they'll be sad?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't want, okay, I didn't want to make, don't be sad. No, but no, it's true. But it's also a little bit more complicated because if it's not just 10 words, it makes a lot more sense of why this was so important. Anyways, have a great rest of the week, folks. We do have a special Veterans Day service. We're also pre-recording the service, but I'll have a special live veterans service with Wendy this Friday night too, which will also be broadcast. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Stay good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Good night.